Welcome back. We have some serious cold coming, and it has been nice balmy days, 60s, 70s, and the plants are confused. I planted asparagus and potatoes and some other things that were just raring to go, and they have burst up, and now we find out that we're going to have looks like 21 degrees overnight, which will kill a lot of things, including brassicas, and it'll probably kill the asparagus that we just planted. But there was nothing we could really do with that asparagus. It needed to get planted. It was already sprouting in the bags, and well, there you go. So we're just gonna have to cover it. Now, since I'm cheap, this is the way we're gonna do it. Right here are some of those grocery store potatoes that were completely covered with eyes. They look very pretty, they're very happy, but they won't be so happy after a freeze. So the easy way to do it is to just cover them with leaves. This should be plenty of insulation to keep them through the cold of a cold night. And we just throw them in there. There's a lot of airspace in there. And then after the cold passes, all we have to do is spread this out and use it for mulch. But I'm not gonna mulch the entire bed right now because I'll forget where my potatoes are and they may stay buried, and we certainly don't want that. But as I'm doing it, I'm kind of just fluffing it a little bit. Just let some air in so they're not really matted up. Got a little daylily coming up here. I don't want that to get frozen. Blanched daylilies. So we have these cabbages here. Cabbages can take temperatures into the 20s, but after this balmy weather, and these guys are starting to head up. Last time we hit about 24 or so, they got burned. And I feel like after this weather, we better cover them all up nicely and hope they do okay. I mean, I hate to pile stuff on top of them, but I think we're actually gonna lose all these cabbages if we don't do something. Now, if I wasn't being a cheapskate, I could go out and get some weed cloth. My friend Elizabeth told me if I went out and got some of that cheap weed cloth, and she said she sewed some of it together and just put it right down her rows. She got 4-foot wide stuff. She sewed it and cut it to 6 foot so they would cover her beds completely. And she just takes it out and lays it down in frost events, and that's her inexpensive way of doing it. But I didn't feel like going through that trouble or spending any more money. So figure we've got all this forest here and all these leaves, and I've got plenty of children that can help me rake it up. So they just rake it all onto a tarp, rake up a big pile, put it on a tarp, drag the tarp over here, dump it in the gardens in between. And many hands make light work. The last thing we've got to do is cover the trees that have gotten confused. This little peach right here is super confused because it was cold, it was cold, it was warm, it was warm, it was cold, it was warm, it was cold, it was warm, and then it was warm for quite a while. And it was like, you know what? I think it's time to wake up. You can see how I pruned this guy right here. You see this? I took the center out. We've got these 5 nice branches here. You should really have maybe 3, not 5, but I like the shape of it. It reminded me of H.P. Lovecraft's star-headed aliens, so I just went with it. But I have right here to cover it this sheet. This sheet I got from the thrift store. $2.39, and I got a 15% discount because they love me. But one of those benefits of having short little trees is that you can cover them really easily, and you cover them like this. Now, I could just do this, right? And that's pretty good. That's cool. It's actually a little cooler than it should be because there's another trick. See all this mulch right here? Now, if you're a northern gardener, you're like, you've got to mulch everything because it's going to freeze the ground hard and it's going to freeze way down in there and it's going to just kill the roots of something. So you mulch, you mulch all your flower beds and stuff so things come back. But when you're dealing with the kind of weather we have in the south, usually the freezes are only lasting a few hours. These zone 8B freezes, we're talking a few hours. Now, what happens is these leaves keep this ground beneath from radiating warmth because this ground, particularly when it's wet, is radiating heat upwards. It's not freezing solid down in here. But the mulch acts like an insulation layer, and it will actually be colder above the mulch and around the tree if you don't bare the ground. If you bare the ground around your fruit tree like that, that is acting like a heater overnight. And there's going to be constant little bit of warmer temperatures coming upwards because of the thermal mass of the ground. The ground does not get super stinking cold. So you see that? Now you're being smart. This is one of the tricks that I write about in Push the Zone, the Good Guide to Growing Tropical Plants Beyond the Tropics. There's a lot of research I did into zone pushing and frost protection techniques and microclimates. And after some years of playing around with these things in North Florida, I wrote the book Push the Zone. And I got Professor Dr. Franco to write me the introduction to the book, which was really cool because he wrote a book also on zone pushing, which was more on ornamental plants, called Palms Won't Grow Here and Other Myths. And he was experimenting up north, growing more tropical species. So his book was one of my references, and I thought, I love this guy's thought process and his experimentation, and it inspired me to do some too. And then I thought, you know what? Why don't I just write him and send him a copy of the book and see if he wants to write an introduction? And he did, so I thought that was pretty neat. But there, right there, that is going to really be like a mini greenhouse. Thermal mass coming up underneath. Now, if you lived in a colder climate, this is not the way you would do it. Do the deep mulch to protect the roots and all that kind of stuff. And if you're dealing with freezes that last more than maybe 24 hours, it gets colder. But the thermal mass of that ground underneath is going to keep this quite nice and warm. And then you just remulch later. The mulch is really important in the summer to keep the roots cool. Right now, it's acting as an insulation layer, and we don't want that. We don't want the warmth insulated away. We want the warmth coming up and staying inside of this envelope created by a $2.39 sheet. Awesome frost protection. So those are 3 super easy frost protection methods. Cover things with mulch, just nice loose layers, leaves, pine needles, whatever you got. 2, you can sew together landscape fabric like my friend Elizabeth does. And 3, you can go to your thrift store and get cheap sheets and blankets and use those to cover your trees. And if you keep your trees pruned small, you can keep them covered for multiple years, and you can push the zone easily by a zone or 2 just with some cheap sheets and staying on top of it. So thanks for joining me. Be sure to check out my book, Push the Zone, The Good Guide to Growing Tropical Plants Beyond the Tropics. I'll put a link in the description. And until next time, may your thumbs always be green.
I buried my rabbit beneath the cherry tree one fine afternoon. Someday I know that we'll meet again on a fruit salad spoon. Laid my hamster to rest last night beneath the pumpkin vine.